Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to preview the Packers and the Chargers. It will be a Sunday noon kickoff at Lambeau Field. We have to enjoy this one, Wes, because it's the last Sunday noon kickoff we're going to have for a while after a nice run of them here from a work perspective. But that aside,
the omelets have been exceptional this year too.
Yeah, that aside, the Chargers, and if I can get through this entire show without calling them the San Diego Chargers, that'll be an accomplishment, because I'm still not used to the fact that they are the Los Angeles Chargers.
Do you want to do like a bet, like $1, whoever calls them San Diego first the rest of the show? Put a
little jar in front of my
the San Diego jar.
Drop money in there every time I call them the San Diego Chargers. They're coming into Lambeau Field with a 4-5 record, Wes, and a few things stand out about this team when you look at just the scores, the numbers, how their season has gone. 6 of their 9 games decided by one score, and the Chargers are 2-4 in those one-score games. This is a team that certainly at 4-5, looking to get to 500 and keep themselves right in the thick of things in the AFC, but they are not far off from being in a much better position because they played some down-to-the-wire, high-scoring, close games, including last week against the Detroit Lions. Packers are going to have to be ready for everything that Justin Herbert and this offense is going to throw at them on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, the Chargers are such an interesting ball club because you know exactly what you're getting when you face them, and teams still can't stop it.
Right.
And, first and foremost, the fact, and one of the things I've been drilling home all week, they've played 9 games. 2 of them they've been held under 20 points, and they lost both of those games.
Actually, only 2 that they've been held under 24 points.
24, yes.
24 points or more in 7 of their 9 games, and the only 2 teams to do it, hold them under 24, the Chiefs and the Cowboys, 2 teams that everybody's expecting are going to be playing, well into January in the postseason here in the NFL. Everybody else has had a hard time stopping these guys.
Yeah, and they're an annoying team to face because you have Keenan Allen, who's in the middle of an all-pro season right now, almost 900 receiving yards, 73 receptions. But then you got that, it's almost like a gnat in the backfield in Austin Eckler, where he can run the ball, he can catch the ball, and just when you think you have him in a third down situation where you're going to get off the field, Eckler can make something happen to continue drives. I mean, when I look at the Chargers, and I've watched them a lot this season because, again, Eckler is one of my fantasy running backs. What impresses me the most is this game, ultimately, Mike, is about moving the chains. And there are very few teams in the National Football League that move the chains better than the LA Chargers.
Yeah, you talk about Austin Eckler. He's had missed some time earlier in the season with an injury, but even with the time that he's missed, he still has 680 yards from scrimmage, combining his rushing and receiving. And what really jumps out is that as a running back, his average per reception when he catches a pass is 11.3 yards.
Yeah.
That's extremely rare when a running back is averaging more than 10 yards per catch, because usually running backs who are used frequently as pass catchers, you're going to end up with like an 8 or a 9 or 9.5 yard average. He's almost at 11.5 yard average when he catches a pass. And I hope I'm not dating myself here, but what the only like comp in a sense that I can say, and it's not even really a comp because there's a caveat to it, he reminds me of Roger Craig from those old San Francisco 49ers offenses, but he's Roger Craig who's a lot harder to tackle because of his quickness and his shiftiness and everything he can do with the ball in his hands. This guy is a big-time weapon in this offense. And then, as you mentioned, you got Keenan Allen on the outside, 73 catches, 895 yards, 6 touchdowns this season, cracked the 10,000-yard mark. He's now the 6th active receiver in the NFL who has 10,000 plus career receiving yards, and the guy pulling the trigger on everything, Justin Herbert, a 99.5 passer rating on the year, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and an arm that is not afraid to make any throw he's asked to make.
No, I have always been a big Justin Herbert fan.
Yeah, me too.
During the pre-draft process, I brought it up when we did our 3 Things video, but I remember talking with David Yost, who was Jordan Love's offensive coordinator and quarterback coach at Utah State. Well, before that, he was at Oregon with Justin Herbert. And just the stories that he told of this guy in his professionalism, his arm strength, and just the pure intangibles that they had to work with. He was a dynamic, I think in a lot of years would have probably even been a number 1 overall pick. It just so happened that he ended up being in probably the most quarterback-rich draft class of this era. And he's done everything I think you could have asked from him with the Chargers. I know a lot of people bring up his quarterback wins and loss record, but I'll tell you what, Mike, you and I have covered enough football that you know whether or not you have a guy when you've been dealing with him for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert is the guy for the Chargers. And as much as we've always talked about the Packers and this tradition of quarterbacks, I think you really need to put the Chargers in that conversation too. To go from Drew Brees, who wasn't Drew Brees at the time, I get that.
Yeah.
But to go from Drew Brees to Phillip Rivers to now with Herbert, just that passing of the baton and what he's been able to do. The fact that Keenan Allen has been as dynamic as he's been with both Rivers and Herbert at different junctures in his career,
right,
I think speaks to the overall ability of Herbert, who, by the way, has had to make a little bit happen too because he lost Eckler for a couple weeks, and he's been without Mike Williams too now after he's been out for the season. So it's not like they just have this plethora of receiving options. A lot of times he's had to make plays on his own as well.
Yeah, and Justin Herbert, for a bigger quarterback, stature-wise, size-wise, he's a pretty good-sized guy. He can beat you with his legs. I mean, I go back to, as a Wisconsin Badger fan, go back to watching him in the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, where he really didn't throw the ball all that well in that game, but he killed Wisconsin with his legs because for a big guy, he can really run. He can get his momentum going. He can make plays happen that way. He's kind of like Josh Allen in that way, although it's not as though the Chargers, do like designed runs or called runs for him like Buffalo does with Allen. But for a big guy, he can be really, really dangerous when he decides to take off and run. The flip side of this, of course, with the Chargers is a struggling defense. And that's really the biggest reason that for everything they've done offensively, they are only 4-5 so far this year. The defense ranks 31st in the league in yards allowed, 24th in the league in points allowed, last in the league in passing yards allowed and in first downs allowed. Teams have done kind of whatever they've wanted to against the Chargers defense in a lot of games. And just when the Chargers thought they were kind of getting their defense back to where they'd like to see it after a slow start to the season, then the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff and those guys, they got into that shootout last week, and then now everybody's saying with Brandon Staley, like, what's going on with that defense again? With the Packers showing the progress that they did offensively against the Steelers, like we talked about on our last show, this could be a really, really entertaining football game, Wes.
It could. Here's what's funny about this. Pittsburgh, nothing made sense with them, their defense, their team, their points for, points against, being 6-3 and what have you. I can't figure out the Chargers defense at all.
Yeah.
Like why they're struggling. They take the ball away. They have a top 10 ranked defense in terms of takeaways. Khalil Mack has 9 sacks, although a bulk of those have come in a couple games. Joey Bosa, Asante Samuel, Eric Kendricks, Derwin James. They have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. Like, if you just didn't look at the stats at all and were just like, okay, this is the defense you're facing.
Yeah, if you just look at the depth chart, the guys at the front of all those guys you named off, you'd be like, oh, this ought to be a top 10, top 12 defense in the league.
Yeah, and it would be different if it's like, okay, well, they're not getting home to the quarterback, or they're not taking the ball away, or they can't get off the field. They do everything pretty well, but you saw last week in that game against, with the Lions, is that, the way they ran the ball, how they built the run off of that, and just the issues they had, and ultimately end up losing a shootout against a veteran quarterback. That's the big challenge. For Green Bay's standpoint, I think it's a big opportunity. There are yards to be gained out there. They got yards last week against Pittsburgh, who at the time I think was ranked 31st in total defense. So you hope that you can convert and also being able to make that into points in the red area. But certainly when you look in terms of what they have and the positions and the talent that is available there, the Chargers look as formidable as any defense you're going to see in this league.
Yeah, I want to get to our keys to victory in a moment, but going back, rewinding just a little bit to the Chargers offense, I have to say that last week we might have seen Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Lions, pay the Chargers offense the ultimate sign of respect, because You know how Dan Campbell feels about his team and his defense, and he's not going to sell those guys short for a second. But with a $1:45 on the clock in a tie game, 38-38, the Lions had a 4th and 2 from the 26-yard line, so it would have been a 44-yard field goal. Dan Campbell did not want Justin Herbert to get the ball back.
Yeah.
So he passed on a 44-yard field goal with a $1:45 on the clock. He went for it on 4th and 2, was able to convert, and then they drained the clock and kicked a 41-yard field goal. It was only 3 yards closer than what he had a minute and 40 seconds prior. But because of the 4th down conversion, they were able to drain the clock, hit the 41-yarder as a walk-off, and Justin Herbert did not get the ball back. That's as big a sign of respect for that Chargers offense coming from a guy like Dan Campbell, who would never want to sell his guys short at all. He did not want Justin Herbert to get the ball back one more time in that game, and he was doing everything he could to prevent that. It worked out for the Lions. It was a kick-in-the-gut loss for the Chargers for as big a day as they had offensively. And, response-wise, it's going to be interesting here because Chargers had to feel pretty rotten coming off their home field against the Lions, letting that game get away against Detroit. And while the Packers certainly didn't feel great about things walking off the field in Pittsburgh last week, there were some things, as we talked about, to feel better about that the Packers feel that they can build upon as they get now a home game coming up this week. How each of these teams sort of responds to their most recent outings last weekend, I think will be very interesting to watch.
Well, and that's going to be the mentality of both sides. Is that for Green Bay's standpoint? If I'm Jordan Love, if I'm these young receivers, I watch that film. I try to learn from what happened on those last 2 series, but really appreciate that we made progress in this game. Where the Chargers are in a tough spot is they are a more veteran team. Yes, they've had some setbacks with injuries, but they expected to come out and compete for a Super Bowl this year. They expected to be a team that's going to make a push for playoffs, and here they are at 4-5, trying to kind of salvage their season and claw it out to get into a playoff spot here in what is going to be a very competitive AFC playoff picture.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this bleeds or not, Michael, into my keys for victory, but the thing I look at the most at Green Bay is you are back at Lambeau Field, and this is the second time this season the Chargers are playing on grass, which is just remarkable for how much they've been on turf this year. You have to make sure that you take advantage of that. Secondly, Green Bay has to run the football, and they have to defend the run. The Chargers do a lot of things great on offense. Running the ball has not been one of them this year. As dynamic as Eckler has been, he hasn't had as much production on the ground this year. When they had to go to Josh Kelly earlier this year, there wasn't as much production there. You have to get Justin Herbert in this offense into 3rd and long situations. Otherwise, you're in for a long afternoon.
Yeah, no question about it. I'll take care of some sponsor business, and then we will dive into those keys to victory a little bit more. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. I like what you said about obviously getting the Chargers into 3rd and long. And what I want to add to that is I expect, because Justin Herbert's a guy who's done it his whole career, the Chargers are going to convert some 3rd and longs. You're going to get them in 3rd and 10, and they're going to move the chains because they're going to have something. They can be that good offensively. I think one of the keys to this for Green Bay's defense is to not ride that roller coaster, to not suddenly have that big emotional letdown or psychological letdown if you do give up a 3rd and long conversion. It's like, hey, strap it up. Here's another series. Let's get him in another 3rd down. That's the mentality you have to take because these guys, when they get in 3rd and long, they're a little bit better. They're more dangerous in that situation than a lot of other offenses you might face. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and Keenan Allen's a big reason for that. I mean, he's a human highlight reel. And like I remember we were talking a couple weeks ago when he had his catch that ended up giving him 10,000 career yards for his career. This is just a remarkable talent. And the great thing about Allen and what has made him adapt so well is as he's gotten older, and he's had some big injuries too, man. but he's always come back and he's evolved. And he's evolved with this passing offense, and certainly he's become the focal point without having Mike Williams there. And he is a guy that is going to help you get right in some of those situations. I think they have two really good tight ends too. To be honest with you, I think Garrett Everett and then Donald Parham, who's like 6'8". I've watched.
Yeah,
him.
he's a tall dude.
He can move some dudes, and also is a guy that could be a dangerous threat in the red zone. They have weapons to be able to convert on you. And I don't know if I'm going to take this over and make it into one of my keys of victory on my own here, but the first down conversions I think are going to be paramount in this game, because when you look at Brandon Staley's defense, much like with Joe Barry, the whole idea there is you don't want to give up the explosive play. Well, unfortunately for the Chargers this year, they're giving up more first downs than any other team in the league.
Right.
And when a defense is taking that away, whether it's the two shell, whether it's some of their coverages that they're giving you, you have to be able to find ways to produce yards. And for Green Bay, I think specifically, whether it's running the ball or whether it's getting into those third and favorables, matriculating the ball down the field, to steal a phrase there, and kind of working the long way, because when you're going up against a team that can convert and can move the ball and can score in as many different ways as the Chargers can, offensively you have to be able to match that pace.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what happens as far as how the Packers are going to try to match up against Keenan Allen, because Jair Alexander, at the time we're taping this on Thursday morning, is not back on the practice field yet from his shoulder injury. He did not practice on Wednesday. Matt LaFleur did not sound overly hopeful, not ruling him out yet by any means, but wasn't sounding overly hopeful about where things are with Alexander this week. So obviously that's going to put, again, a lot on Carrington Valentine, Corey Ballentine. You're going to have Rudy Ford had played last week but then didn't practice on Wednesday, so we're not really sure what the Packers secondary is going to look like here. For me, if I'm going to talk keys to victory in this game, this game just screams at me that it's going to be decided in the red zones. And I say red zones plural because I think both of these teams are going to move the ball. I think both of these teams are going to have ample scoring opportunities in this game. And I think it's going to come down to, can the Packers convert enough of their opportunities in the red zone into touchdowns, and can the defense potentially get a couple of stops in the red zone to force field goals? I think that's where this game is going to hinge. Those two third quarter possessions against the Steelers last week, the Packers moved the ball right down the field, and you get a first down in the red zone, but then suddenly everything stalls out, and on back-to-back opportunities there, you end up settling for field goals, and the Packers did use those 6 points to take the lead. But if those 6 points are possibly 10 points or maybe even 14, the whole rest of that second half in Pittsburgh plays out differently. And I think we're going to see opportunities in this game against the Chargers where a lot is going to be hinging in both directions on whether offenses can convert red zone opportunities into touchdowns or if the defenses can get the stops to force field goals. I think this game gets decided between the 20-yard line and the goal line on both ends of the field.
Yeah, I agree, Mike, because Packers, they're going up against the second-ranked red zone offense in the league right now in the Chargers, and they actually have a pretty darn good kicker in Cameron Dicker.
Dicker the kicker,
who, again, I think has sort of helped settle that spot down for them now and has sort of found his way and getting in the comfort zone. But Green Bay, it's so interesting, Mike. They're 27th right now in red zone offense, and that's after a few weeks in the beginning of the season where they were right up there as one of the top in the NFL. So just trying to find that momentum again. We've seen it. We saw it at the opening drive last week in Pittsburgh, and that beautiful throw that Jordan Love made to the back of the end zone to Romeo Doubs, who did the toe tap and got the score.
Yeah.
This offense can do it, but they just, especially in the fourth quarter, it's been a real grind lately. So, yeah, I agree with you. Probably more than anything in this game, being able to make those long drives and getting all 6 points out of them, that is going to be pivotal for these offenses.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking around the rest of the league in Week 11, couple weeks ago, it turned out we were talking about home teams holding serve. Last week, it turned out we were talking about road teams getting big victories. I'm not sure which way it's going to go this week, but the games we're going to be talking about are the prime time games on the schedule, because Thursday night is Cincinnati against Baltimore. Sunday night is Minnesota against Denver, two teams that The Vikings were 0-3. The Broncos were 1-5. And now here it is in Week 11, and these two teams are playing a game, both of them feeling like they are right in the playoff hunt in their respective conferences. And then the biggest of the big primetime games this week, Monday Night Football, Philadelphia at Kansas City. So with that primetime slate on the way here in Week 11, I'll let you pick which one you want to start with.
I just always get a kick when you see, Philly versus Kansas City. I'm just imagining all the guys in the New York office back in May or whatever just sitting there like chuckling themselves like, we got that one for November sweeps. Perfect. Yeah. The Kelsey brothers. Wait, yeah. Taylor Swift suddenly involved.
The Super Bowl, the Super Bowl rematch, and then you get the whole Taylor Swift thing thrown in 2023 that nobody saw coming.
When you're trying to set commercial ad rates, that's going to be the number one game that you're going to be working with. Hey, man, Denver. You got to have Denver. And I think if the Broncos, this run they've been on, if you're a Packers fan, keep it going and seeing if they have the magic to solve this Josh Dobbs problem that has sort of been making its way through the National Football League. That is going to be a huge one. I'll be really honest with you, Mike. The Chicago game is really interesting to me because at the time in which we're taping this, all indications are that Justin Fields is going to play in this game from what I've been gathering off of the social media.
Yeah.
So, the Bears are still trying to build something here. They're still trying to convince themselves that there's the rainbow at the end of this thing, whether it's this season or next season. And Denver and Detroit is flying about as high as a team can fly right now. And the culture's there. I even saw that quip. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs was talking with Amon-Ra St. Brown in his 33rd team podcast, even saying, David Montgomery and him talking during the game last week, and Montgomery actually basically giving Gibbs the play to go and score the touchdown on the 1 yard line when originally Montgomery was going to stay in or Gibbs was going to come out. They got a good thing going, and I think they've proved me wrong to a certain extent in where they've been able to take this thing. But the Chicago Bears, man, they're another team too that's still trying to show that, hey, there's still something to be salvaged from this season. This would be no better way to do it than going into Detroit and finding a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good games to pay attention to. Obviously, next week we'll be on the short week, getting ready to go to Detroit for for Thanksgiving. I got to put the money in the jar for that one. I got through the show without saying San Diego Chargers, and then I blow the holiday. Anyway,
it feels like Christmas, bro.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I need to enjoy this last Sunday noon kickoff for a while because things are going to start to get a little rougher from a work perspective. But that being said, what I wanted to alert our regular watchers and listeners to is that we will just have one episode next week, as usual, posted on a Tuesday, but then we will not have the usual Thursday episode because obviously we'll be in Detroit for Thanksgiving covering the Packers and the Lions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to eating my turkey roll with you. Before, I want to mention one last game, can I? I'm messing up the flow of our anniversary.
No.
Is there a bigger Week 11 game you can think of than the Jets versus the Bills? And the fact that the Bills made a decision to change their offensive coordinator going up against one of the best teams and their best defenses in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Bills are 5-5. They lose that game, they're 5-6. Whew.
Yeah.
Pressure.
A team that a fan base that has been starving for time immemorial for a Super Bowl championship, and they've thought the last few years they've been right on the edge, and now suddenly it looks like they could be scrambling just to get into the playoffs in the AFC. The Bills might end up being as thankful as anybody that the 7th playoff spot now exists in the conference, because it's another opportunity where they can try to get themselves in and make a run before the proverbial window perhaps starts to get a little smaller after the opportunities that have gotten away from them recently.
You and I have a big week. We have this game at noon Central Time. We will come back. We will have the Packers on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And then off into the weekend, which will be our last weekend until the end of the season.
The last catch your breath moment until the end of the season for us. So
put your seatbelt on. Spoff's driving.
Buckle up, folks. All right, with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. We will have everything for you from Sunday's game against the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers, at Lambeau Field. It's all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.